finally, a source of raw, real, and honest information on healthcare issues that matter most. Welcome to BS Free MD. From the latest medical information to how to stay sane as a doctor or a patient, no subject is taboo, no BS is allowed. Now, let's welcome your hosts, Doctors May and Tim Hindmarsh.
Well, we are really excited to have Alan Thayer with us, an attorney from Eugene, Oregon, who practices primarily business law, to talk about religious accommodations with regards to vaccine mandates. By the time this airs, Oregon will have already passed the 18th of October, which was sort of the drop dead date to be vaccinated or have an accommodation. But we know we have a lot of listeners from all over the country. And of course, there's federal law as well that the accommodations, deal with and so forth. So welcome, Alan. Tell us just a little bit about yourself.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be here. I'm a business lawyer. I know this is audio, so it's going to lose a little bit of effect, but been practicing business law in Oregon since I was young and skinny and had dark hair. So it's been a few years now, actually since 1985. I represent businesses, and it's been my privilege to represent a lot of businesses in Oregon, large and small, publicly traded corporations, and to startup corporations. And it is always an honor when clients or business people come to me with a problem and they ask me for help. And I consider it an honor and a privilege, and I still have, after all these years, have not lost the awe and sense of responsibility when someone comes calling.
Yeah, that's great. Having dealt with some legal things ourselves over the last, couple of years, it's amazing. People try to, they badmouth lawyers until they need one. And then all of a sudden it's just like they become your very, very best friend.
That's just like the dentist. I mean, yeah, everybody hates the dentist until they need it.
I like lawyers more than dentists. I'm sorry.
Well, actually, I got to tell you, once I got to a certain age, I started liking my doctor a lot less.
Yeah.
A lot less. Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
Although you could maybe have nitrous in your practice, and that might help too. You never know.
Yeah, the dentists do have us on that one.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's dive right into the whole concept of legal accommodation for the vaccine mandates. And if you could kind of explain that to us, because there's a lot of language that's been thrown around as far as exemptions and so forth. And that's really legally not correct. So if you could explain that to our listeners, that'd be great.
So the Oregon Health Authority set out a number of vaccination rules, 2 rules. One is for those in the healthcare area, healthcare employees and contractors, and the other for those in education. At the same time, the state of Oregon required state employees to also be vaccinated or to receive, under Oregon's language, a religious exception. Now, what does religious exception means? We don't know. We don't know what the state of Oregon thinks it means, and that causes some concern. And if your listener is in a state where they're trying to change up the language, they ought to be cautious as well. The leading authority for religious accommodations is Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And there the language is accommodation. So if there's discussion other than accommodation, then you need to be concerned.
So a quick question. How come, things that I'm reading and seeing on published sites from OPB to news stations throughout the state are using the term religious exemption. Is that just a mistake on the reporter or the journalist part, or is it something that they're trying to get at something different?
I don't know. I think it's probably an error. I've even noticed in some of when I'm talking and in a document that we caught at the proofreading stage, we had exemption in there. I think people are used to an exemption from a requirement as part of a religious accommodation or as part of an accommodation under the Americans with Disability. You're exempt from this workplace requirement. And I think that's where exemption comes from. Exception is brand spanking new. And I think Oregon's being tricky. And if you see it anywhere else, I think they're trying to be just as cute as well.
So would there be an actual, like an actual legal difference if it said exemption versus accommodation? And can you explain that, or not? Is it, or not necessarily?
That's the concern. We don't know. And that's up to a court to decide. Just like a lot of questions people may have.
Right. So, but the language in the 1964 bill is accommodation.
That's correct. That's correct.
So if you want to be as buttoned up on the language and not kind of tied in knots, so to speak, with, different legalese or different definitions or definitions that people may make up, or a judge may make up, in 2 months, the cleanest thing to do is to ask for an accommodation based on, your religious beliefs according to the Civil Rights Act of 1964.
Title VII. Now, one thing to keep in mind, though, because we're starting to see some schools that are saying they're going to require kids to be vaccinated, and you're seeing some other context. Title VII only applies in the employment context. So in Oregon, we've had these state mandated vaccination requirements. And as you mentioned, everything goes into effect as of the day of this recording. But private employers are following right afterwards. And we're working with a number of people already where the private employers are requesting this. And they're starting to borrow the state language. And it's really important, whether you're working with a private employer in Oregon or one of the non-mandated employers already, or if you're in some other state, to use that accommodation language.
Yeah, that's a super helpful tip. Like, I actually just have looked at an email from one of our listeners, and she works in another state, and she works for the I'm not, I don't want to give too much detail away, but works for a federal agency, and she's just like, there's no way out. And it's like, people are trying to put in tons of, religious exemptions or accommodations, however you want to word it. And they're like, no, they're going to be really strict. They're going to, it's very hard to get a medical one through. And I'm just sitting there like, what? So if you work for a federal agency, the Constitution doesn't cover you. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
No, you're absolutely right. And Title VII applies to the federal government as an employer. Under Title VII, it's pretty easy to qualify. So when you look at, we're hearing stories, and we've actually seen some examples where employers have taken it upon themselves to judge whether someone has sincerely held religious beliefs or not. Now, part of that is because the state has told employers in certain industries, if the employee mentions something that the state considers to be political, then the employer is to deny the request. And legal arguments that some people are asserting, the way they are asserting them, the state is interpreting that as political. And that's kind of Orwellian when you think about it, when, okay, legal becomes political, and therefore if it's political, it can't be religious, and therefore your request does not apply. But the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission has made really clear that it doesn't matter if this belief is a newly acquired belief. It doesn't matter if the belief is infrequently observed. It doesn't matter if the belief goes against the mainstream of the faith. It still can qualify as a sincerely held religious belief. So we're seeing employers that are judging religious beliefs. We're seeing some employers that are automatically denying all religious beliefs just as a means to bully people into receiving the vaccine. And in many instances that we're aware of, employees who've had to choose between putting food on their table a week from now and receiving a vaccine that they consider to be against their religious beliefs, they've sadly, but understandably, they have gone ahead and received the shot.
Okay, so the other thing that comes to mind, like instantaneously to me, is what right does your employee, like if you're working in a healthcare environment. So, for instance, let me just kind of set the stage. If you want to go to nursing school or medical school, you have to have proof that you've been, not proof that you've been vaccinated, but proof that you're immune to hepatitis B. Okay, because you're at significant risk. It's actually for your protection as an employee. And so if you have the vaccination early, you can get a titer or show proof of vaccination. And even if you're not immune, they don't make you get a titer, I don't think, anymore. And if you say, well, I might have had it, you can, show that you have antibodies and then you're good to go, or you get, the 3 shots for the hepatitis B. But you see all of this now bleeding into all these other industries that aren't healthcare related. So like how can a plumbing company or a financial services company or any other business, coffee shop, demand your medical information without violating HIPAA? Like, it doesn't make any sense.
Well, what the federal government giveth, the federal government can taketh away. And what I understand is that there are administrative rules out there that exclude vaccination status from the HIPAA requirements.
So any company, regardless, can say we have to have proof of vaccination status.
Well, that's what they're being told they can say. I haven't looked into that specific legal issue, although I have for quite a while now been advising companies on reasons why it would be bad for them to do so. And so I don't think companies should be doing it, but there certainly are those that are doing it. And there are those that are doing it ahead of the Biden promise of new federal rules, and we will see. I think that employers are accepting a tremendous financial liability risk by doing that. Right now, it's only the Pfizer vaccine that has received FDA approval, and but the way the FDA did it. Sorry about that noise in the background. I don't know how to turn that ringer off, but maybe that'll do it. Nope. So they approved Comirnaty, I think it's called, but they kept their emergency use authorized vaccine separate from Comirnaty. They said the two are legally separate. They can be used interchangeably, but they are two different items. And right now, from what I understand, is they are still distributing the stockpiles of the emergency use authorized vaccine and not the approved Comirnaty. And for Moderna and Pfizer, I don't think either one of them have received FDA approval yet. So if you're telling people to get those shots, well, under emergency use authorization, the drug companies are not liable for any consequences from those drugs or from those vaccines. They have complete immunity. The federal government has complete immunity. The state government has complete immunity. If an employer tells someone to get the vaccine in order to keep your job and the person has an adverse consequence, who are they going to sue? Won't be the drug manufacturers, won't be the state, won't be the Biden administration. And the only party left to sue is the employer. Now, some people say, well, workers' comp will cover that. Well, or excuse me, not workers' comp. Workers' comp will cover that. But workers' comp covers employment-related accidents and employment-related injuries, and is a mandate such as this a employment-related injury? The courts will tell us, and they'll tell us eventually over time, but that's by no means a certainty. The risk may be small, but in some instances, the damage could be very, very high. It's like insurance on your house. Everyone has fire insurance on the house. The odds of a fire for your home are really, really remote. But if there is a fire, the damage could be huge, and that's why you have insurance. In neighboring state of Washington, a young mother from the Seattle area died of a brain hemorrhage 1 week after receiving a COVID vaccine, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. Young woman, she happens to be the niece of one of my best friends from college. Her grandfather was the former mayor of Portland. And it's tragic. And what would the liability associated with the death of a young worker who leaves 3 kids and a husband? That's going to be a tremendous risk, and it probably isn't covered by the business's other insurance. So these are things that businesses ought to be considering very carefully. And when everyone tells you, oh no, it's been approved, well, it's not whether something's been approved, it's what's being distributed.
Well, right. And like, I think if I was at a John Grisham-esque lawyer looking to be like the rainmaker, the low-hanging fruit from my perspective would be universities, because it's super easy to make an argument that, a healthy 20-year-old with a BMI of 18 who's on the cross-country team doesn't need a vaccine, when, native COVID to somebody of that age and fitness demographic is basically zero. So you've mandated that my son to be able to, go to the University of Ohio or pick your, gigantic university and compete on the cross-country team and be able to go to school in person, has to have a vaccination that only affords him risk, affords him no benefit. I mean, like that makes the Jerry Sandusky, child abuse Penn State thing look like romper room. I mean, I can, in my twisted mind, I hear Brinks trucks beeping as they're backing up to these universities.
Could be with universities too. Many of them are state universities, so they are subject to the U.S. Constitution and the constitutions of the various states, where private employers are not subject to constitutional requirements. You're going to see a lot of lawsuits for quite a while, and it's only going to take a couple of the right lawsuits, I think, to make a big difference. And there's going to be a lot of other lawsuits out there. Don't get too worked up over lawsuits that you happen to see right now in the media or the rulings, because these cases have a long ways to go to wind themselves through the courts.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to ask. I'd done, some scant reading and on what's happening in Oregon, mostly where some people have applied. Of course, they say religious exemptions instead of accommodations. from state workers to medical people. The focus is on teachers and healthcare workers, but that a lot of them have gone through the first layer of the court and have been denied, and just kind of the way they reported it, sort of laughed at. So, can you kind of walk us through what you expect to happen? I mean, for people that have already applied um, for religious accommodation and their employer has said sorry, or a lot of places will have said yes, we'll accept it, and the next thing you know, they've been laid off. Or from there, do these people have to pursue legal action themselves? Is it class action by state? And the ones that have gone through the initial proceedings that have been denied, then what happens next?
Yeah, the sad thing is terminated employees can't afford to bring lawsuits on their own. Many of them. A lot of the lawsuits you see are brought by advocacy groups or brought by attorneys who have financial backing behind them, supporters who want to see these kind of suits brought. I talked to one of those attorneys, and in order to prepare to sue the state of Oregon, he's going to want to have $400,000 in his client trust account in order to get going, because this is very expensive litigation. I mean, you're going to be over $1 million before the cases get real far. A lot of these lawsuits, though, are challenging the authority of the state laws, and they're doing it in state court. And those are interesting laws. They're kind of elephant hunting. They want the big law that invalidates everything, all the governor's powers, all the health authorities' powers. And okay, that's nice, and that may or may not work in the state of Oregon. And this is true in several other states as well, where they have liberal leadership in the state and liberal judges in the state. But the Oregon Court of Appeals, you go back a few years, you're really hard pressed to find cases where the Court of Appeals decided against government action. Criminal attorneys tell me, when reading criminal cases, which is where a lot of government action cases come from, the power of the state, that it gets really hard to try to distinguish an opinion from one case to another, even though the results were the opposite, except for the fact that in both instances, the court upheld state action, even if that action was inconsistent. The case that I am really looking for on behalf of employees is a case under Title VII, brought in federal court under federal law, saying that this employer had an obligation to accommodate sincerely held religious beliefs and did not do so. You need a big bankroll to bring that case. Now you could say, okay, well, what if how about a contingent fee? Well, it's kind of hard, I suspect, to get attorneys interested in a contingent fee in a case where the employees aren't asking for money. They're asking for their jobs back. Yeah, maybe there will be some money in damages there, but that's going to be difficult. You mentioned a class action. Well, it would really be hard to bring a class action against all employers that failed to accommodate religious requests, because each situation is going to be uniquely different. If you're suing a school district and there's 80 teachers who've been let go, you don't need a class action. You just bring a lawsuit with 80 separate plaintiffs. And I think you need a couple of those cases to get employers to say, oh, wait a minute, we've got some real problems here, and we shouldn't be doing this. But I'm convinced, from having helped a number of employees, and I'm a business attorney. I represent employers. The only reason why I'm representing employees is right now is because it kind of happened by accident, and no one else is doing it, and so okay, I'm going to help. And it's grueling just listening to people's stories and what denial is going to mean to them. But we've seen school districts, we've seen hospitals who just blanketly deny everyone in order to get them to get the shot. But bring a couple cases against them and get some good law in federal court, and then I think things are going to change.
Well, I still see that. I mean, you can agree or disagree, but I still see, I mean, I think that it's highly unlikely given if you believe any of the VAERS data on the vaccine fatalities, where there's, I've seen quotes of 15 or 16,000 VAERS reported fatalities from the various COVID vaccines, which is staggering compared to, I mean, it's orders of magnitude compared to other vaccinations. And then you look at, the estimates that VAERS reporting of vaccine side effects is at least 10 to 100 fold less than what actually happens. It seems impossible to believe when you look at the millions of university students that somebody's not going to feel coerced and get the vaccine and die. And they're going to, it's going to be the case of the, 25-year-old cheerleader who is a senior and was going to go to, got accepted to, medical school or law school or whatever. And she ends up dying of the vaccine. And then it just blows up and becomes this massive case. Like I do not see how that doesn't happen. Like it's just, the vaccine side effects have been very underplayed. The benefits have been very overplayed in my medical, opinion. So I just don't see how, I mean, if I was a massive university, I would be scared. If I was a huge healthcare system where they're laying off doctors and nurses and other medical professions, I would be absolutely, like, they should be terrified of their employees and their customers. And they're not. They're terrified of the government. That makes me even more angry. It's just amazing.
Well, and if you're cynical, and I guess they teach lawyers to be cynical in law school, and if not, however many years of practicing law will probably drum that into you. But if you're cynical, it could be the strategy is we'll deny these requests, and people will get vaccinated, and then there's just a handful of people left, and we will make accommodations in order to avoid those lawsuits. Now, you're talking about a different kind of lawsuit, which is the personal injury lawsuit coming from having received the vaccine. And yeah, they ought to be worried. And there's also a risk it won't be covered under their general liability insurance. I don't know how serious of a risk that is, but I suspect vaccine mandates are not the type of risk that are specifically called out in the current errors and omissions insurance that universities and their boards of directors obtain.
Yeah, I mean, it is good. I think it's going to be the Wild West here for the next several years legally. I have another question which just popped into my head because, when we see patients and we send them for, let's say, an ultrasound or an X-ray, we work very closely with the X-ray technologists, and they become very savvy in reading X-rays because they see hundreds of them a year. Now, if I send somebody for a chest X-ray, they have an obvious pneumonia, and the X-ray tech, the patient says, "Hey, what's on my X-ray?" And the X-ray tech says, "Oh, well, you have a pneumonia. There it is." They're practicing medicine without a license. They never do that. It's pounded into their heads to never say anything about an image. The standard answer is the doctor will see this and discuss this with you in short order. So I have heard tons of cases. I filled out a couple medical exemptions or whatever, and they're obvious. I tell patients, I said, I'll fill these out, but you got to have a real reason. You have to have had a vaccine side effect before, or a disease that mitigates really vaccination with any kind of vaccine, not just I don't feel like it. Or if you're truly honestly COVID recovered, I think that's reasonable as well. So that's real medical evidence, real medical rationale makes sense. And then So they want all this written out. They want all their medical information written out on the exemption. The employer wants this, is requesting this. And then they're giving this to their employer, which might be the city works department or the whatever. And then they're looking at it and they're saying, well, that's not a good enough medical exemption. So, how, in the name of common sense, is that not practicing medicine without a license? They're making a medical decision on a medical treatment that the patient that the employee is going to get, and they're going against something that an actual licensed medical practitioner wrote. So, am I completely nuts, or does that make sense?
No, I completely understand it. Let's even back up a step further up the chain on that, and that is the requirement that an employer making a requirement that an employee receive a vaccination. Now, this is not my legal argument. One of my a gentleman who I went to law school with, a guy by the name of Bob Snee, he submitted this argument to me and asked where he was going wrong. But what constitute practice of medicine? It includes offer or undertake to prescribe, give, or administer any drug or medicine for the use of any other person. All right, well, that's interesting. Offer or undertake to prescribe. What does prescribe mean? Well, prescribe means direct, order, or designate the use of or manner of using by spoken or written words. If employers are directing someone to receive a vaccine, I think under Oregon law and in the laws of other states, probably very similar, just the requirement that employees be vaccinated, that alone could be considered practicing medicine without a license, let alone the level of interpretation and analysis that you're talking about when receiving a request under the Americans with Disabilities Act. You're right on. You could be a lawyer.
I just play one on TV. Yeah.
But especially when someone's already had a letter, like Tim said, from a medical professional placed in front of their employer, and they're now they're disagreeing with that. They're challenging that. I mean, to me, that is just amazing and astounding that would even hold up at all. So
maybe we should get together and make a document that we can, people can come in for a visit, and if they meet the criteria, we produce a legal and a medical document, and it says if you don't accept this because this is from a licensed medical practitioner, then we're going to go after you for practicing medicine without a license. I mean, nothing could make me happier, honestly, right now.
Well, I've thought of some documents on the side. Hadn't thought of that one, but
so in your experience, I was going to say, what have you, as far as with whom you've dealt with, people requesting a religious accommodation or a medical exemption, if they've come to you, what has been the result of what you've been hearing? I mean, is it pretty much like mostly denied? Is it like a good percentage accepted? I mean, this is just anecdotal, obviously, in your experience, but I'm just curious if you've gotten any feedback and how it's going, because it looks pretty bleak from what I've read in the news.
Well, I think it depends upon latitude. In Oregon, as you know, the further north you go up the state, the more liberal it gets, and the further south you go, the more conservative it gets. I think a lot of these have been accepted in Southern Oregon, from what I gather, and the Oregon hospitals have been particularly nasty in terms of not accepting these requests. Although I did hear a doctor told me that there's one hospital in the Portland area who is accepting the religious accommodation request of those who have been terminated by other hospitals so that they can fill their hospitals with the people that they need. An entrepreneurial hospital, that sounds
interesting.
That sounds unique.
Well, we've noticed that even in our own business. I mean, we have to, we've started a new small clinic, and we've had to hire people, and it's actually been not that hard for us, because we're like, look, we're a small business. We have to play by all of the state's rules, with regards to testing and all of these kind of things. Um, but if you just want to be tested and masked and whatever the regulations are and not be vaccinated, we don't care. I mean, you know, darn near what 2/3 of our clinics already had COVID anyways, just over the last year, just because it's a pandemic. So, I mean, they're naturally vaccinated. And, there's some of us that are vaccinated and, whatnot. But it's just like, okay, there's rules you can play by. You can accept the accommodations. You can do the testing. And I mean, everyone can get along. And I don't understand it. I mean, that's what I said. If I was a giant hospital system, I'd have three doors. I'd have the vaccine door, the medical accommodate or the medical exemption door, the religious accommodation door, and I'd say fill out the forms or get the shot. This is when you need to have have proof of vaccination or your accommodation. And here's the rules if you get an accommodation, and we're gonna not fire anybody. And if you want to be belligerent and stick your finger in your eye, that's a different story. We'll have another conversation. But like it just seems like such a no-brainer to me. If you want to maintain your solvency, like I don't understand any of this. There's ways around this if they want to do it.
Well, so I'm going to just jump on that thought of Tim's and ask you. So a lot of the medical professional social media that I've been looking at, and the supporters of people having to get the vaccine, the COVID vaccine to work, reference things like having hepatitis vaccine, having a tetanus vaccine, flu vaccines. So what has it been like in, do you know it? Because I certainly don't. In the past, as far as people who truly have a vaccine allergy to the flu and have their medical exemption, I don't know much about religious accommodation for vaccines in the past because I really haven't faced a whole lot of that. But in the past, have these been honored by healthcare groups pretty readily? I think that they have. I've written them for patients for, especially for flu vaccines and people who any egg products, and it's like no big deal. So, I guess based on what's happened in the past, doesn't seem to have been any big legal ramifications or problems. Correct?
No, no, there hasn't. And a lot of the reluctance to receive vaccines, I think in the past, have been people who've had allergic reactions to eggs or some of the preservatives in the vaccine or whatever. But there also have been some who have had religious objections. A former staff member of mine had religious objections. Interestingly enough, she was hired away by the hospital. So a few years ago, they could pay her a lot more than I could afford to. So
But
I don't know how that's worked for her. I haven't heard, but there haven't been problems. Where I thought you might be going with that question is that some folks have said if you've received vaccines in the past, don't come and tell us that you have a religious objection to vaccines. And that analysis is wrong on both the theology and on the legal aspect. Now, I am a lawyer. I don't presume to be a theology expert, although my daughter is in college right now studying theology.
perfect.
Yes. Catherine, hurry up. We'll make you an assistant here in the law firm.
A consultant, yes.
Yeah, because of all these cases that Tim says are going to be coming our way. We need your help, Catherine. But since Jonas Salk developed the first vaccine 100 years ago, every vaccine that has ever been injected in a person has been a dead fragment of the vaccine plus extra stuff in order to invoke an immune response. The vaccines we have today, these novel gene technology vaccines, work entirely differently. And because of that difference, that can lead to different religious arguments. Even though you could accept the vaccines in the past, You don't want to accept these that provide instructions to cells to create spike proteins. That's the theology. The law on it, though, as we talked about earlier from the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, is that even if it was the exact same vaccines made the exact same way, and you had you've received a flu shot every year, now all of a sudden you say you don't want a vaccine. Under EEOC, it doesn't make any difference if it's a newly acquired religious belief. So under the law or the theology, that argument goes away, and you're not banned just because you'd received vaccines in the past.
Yeah, well, and that makes sense. I mean, you're allowed to change your mind, and you're allowed to, have your come to Jesus or come to Buddha moments in life. That's allowed, and so, yeah, I this has been really, really instructive.
Yeah.
I think our listeners are going to love this because, I've been batting this stuff around myself. Like the one, again, because it's so close to what we do personally, is this practicing medicine without a license. Like I can't imagine. Like the employers need to be scared of their employees, and they need to be scared of their customers. I mean, when you run a business, who is your boss? Your boss ultimately is, the consumer that's consuming your good or your service. And the way you do that is you do that through your own hard work and the work of your employees. So there should also be some give and take and some fear of your employees. I mean, that makes perfectly sense. I mean, I say things to May that I would never say to an employee of mine. I mean, are you kidding me? I mean, because it's a work environment, it's a professional situation. And I'm thinking that if there was a way that we can somehow encourage people to sort of put the fear of God back into the employers, because I think you're right. I think the states and federal governments have set these employers up for a massive fall.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that we do on the religious accommodation request that we've helped prepare is we state the religious beliefs, we apply it as to why these beliefs create moral issues with the vaccines. But then we have a statement on legal requirements and even include a document prepared, an advisory for employers prepared by the EEOC on religious accommodation to try to help put some of that fear in employers, or at least make them think twice about just denying this request. By mentioning the law, by including supporting materials, it's all of a sudden, okay, there is absolutely a risk of suit here.
So I know that people they have been asking us and will be clamoring for more info with this. What is the sort of the step-by-step approach that someone will have to go through when requesting religious accommodation or medical accommodation? Now, is it going to vary by state, or is that kind of a basic plan that they could follow? Does it need to be done through an attorney, or can it be all done through a physician? Is there a blanket form or a guideline that you can give us kind of what to go through?
Well, actually, one of the things that we did, we were asked by a union to help its members, firefighters actually, to help their members request accommodations, and that's how we got involved. The union's regular attorneys, we were told they're quite liberal and they believed in the vaccine, so they didn't want to help in that regard. And then we had so many requests that came in after that we couldn't handle it. So we developed a web application where people can go and enter in information about themselves and about their beliefs, and get and then create a customized accommodation request. And then as part of that, it also includes this EEOC directive. And that has worked out well. And we're hearing back from the people who've used it. In some instances, the employers recognize their duty to accommodate. And the further north you went, some of the problems that that folks have had, and we help some of those with challenges to the decisions that were made. The our web application is based on Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, and so therefore it doesn't make any difference what state you are in. The federal law still applies, and some employers are setting out specific requirements. Some of them want people to fill out specific forms. Some of the specific forms want the employees to agree to things the employees won't agree to, which improves the employer's legal position. I will tell you that under the Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Americans with Disabilities Act, there is no specific manner in which employees are required to notify the employer. Employers may have forms traditionally to make it easy for the employee to make these requests for accommodation, and then that way they can argue, see how easy we made it. And if a person starts making these arguments after they've been terminated, it's an indication that maybe these claims are a recent fabrication and they didn't really happen because they didn't avail themselves of the process. But at least the employers I advise, they know that there are no magic words. And if they say, oh my gosh, when I lift my arm above my head or above my shoulder, it hurts, that's an indication that you need to explore further, and you can't wait for them to fill out a form. So we tell people, be careful of those forms. Sometimes what we do is say, okay, go ahead and use those forms, and then just say, see the attached document, and use an accommodation request, such as the accommodation request that we've helped people prepare.
So that's an excellent segue. How can people find you and find that online form that you have?
We can send you a link if you want. We're happy to do that. I don't know if you have the ability to put that in your notes.
We sure can put that in the show notes.
We've kind of had this long drawn out process to redo our webpage. Our webpage needs a little help, but and we're in the process. But on our old webpage, don't judge us by the old webpage. But on the at the bottom of the main page, I'll also put a link, and it'll take you to a page where there's a video where I explain the thinking behind the web forms, and then there's a button to use the web form if people so choose. Whether they use it or not, there's just great information there about what to include in an accommodation request, and there are some warnings to stay away from exceptions, as we talked about earlier.
Right, and I remember you when we were both on Rick Dancer's show last week, the whole point of don't quit, make them lay you off, fire you, whatever the case may be, put the ball back in their court, so to speak, if you're bumping up against this.
Yeah, I think there were 6 things that I suggested people do, and hopefully I remember them. I had them written down the other day when I talked. But first is, if you're denied, push back and send another letter, or ask a lawyer to help you send a letter, but push back. And then second, don't quit, make them fire you. If they do fire you, then apply for unemployment and say that the reason why you were terminated, it's not because you refused to receive a vaccine, but if you made a request for religious accommodation and was denied, say that it was because of religious discrimination and failure to accommodate religious beliefs. And then Oregon and a number of other states have their own, in essence, equal rights commission. With Oregon, civil rights cases are investigated by the Bureau of Labor and Industries. Every state has an equivalent. File a state claim for discrimination and for based on religious beliefs and for failure to accommodate those beliefs, and then also file a similar complaint on the exact same grounds with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. And then I think number 6, the last thing is watch the lawsuits. We're looking for the right lawsuit, and I think if and when that comes, that'll make a big difference. The whole purpose of these accommodations, if you don't keep your job, the whole purpose of the accommodations is to set employers up for liability once some good law is made in the right lawsuit.
Excellent. We'll collate that and put that in our show notes too, because those 6 points are really important. One of the things that just absolutely is pounded into my head from our own attorney was the reason people. I mean, I was just, we've been through some various things, and I've had lots of, I've been around the block a couple of times. I have lots of friends that have dealt with various, employment issues over the years. And I said, why do companies treat people so poorly? And his response was really simple. He knows that 9 out of 10, he's like, look, these giant companies know that 9 out of 10 people will let themselves get rolled. So they just roll them. And if they got to pay out 1 of 10 claims instead of 10 of 10 claims, then they'll just roll people over. And you sit there and you just go, wow, I guess that's why God made lawyers.
Well, I got to tell you, the businesses that we work with, they want to do right by their employees. They want to do right by their customers. It's sometimes hard to do right by employees when employment laws are constantly changing. And there can be problems when you have employees who, and it's not limited to employees, but in society, we seem to have a lottery mentality. Every perceived slight is now, I'm going to go buy a yacht with the money
Exactly.
because I'm not happy with the way you treated me. And equalizing expectations of the parties in those cases is a big deal. But there are all kinds of businesses with all kinds of employment practices, but most of the businesses and all the clients I work with, they want to do the right thing, but they also have to protect their business as well.
Of course. No, exactly. And again, if you wanted to protect your business, then, get your folks vaccinated, give them the accommodations, do whatever it takes to maintain your business. Especially in healthcare, you have this unbelievably highly trained workforce, and you see these gigantic health systems shooting themselves in the foot. And I cannot for the life of me, it's like group psychosis. It makes no sense. I mean, if I owned a private hospital, I'd be like, yeah, you're vaccinated? Great. Welcome. You have an exemption form? Welcome. You have an accommodation? Great. We'll all play by the rules. We'll play by the rules set out by the feds and the state government, but we're not going to, smack you with a hammer until you comply. Because who complies when they're smacked with a hammer? Like, it doesn't make, it doesn't make any sense. Like, none of this, like, the psychology of this is just insanity.
Well, I thought there was a fair amount of irony when people were getting upset over the fetal heartbeat law in Texas, and you can be opposed to that or against that. But the fetal heartbeat law in Texas, they're saying my body, my choice. But I guess it's my body, my choice, unless I want you to get a vaccination.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
No,
well, yeah, but
this is all about the greater good, not your choice. It's all about
society. Right. I mean, we're not going to go down that rabbit hole right now. But again, it's just, I mean, like, if you would have gone back, way back in time to 2018, and then said in 3 years, okay, conservatives are going to be the my body, my choice people, and the most progressive, like right down to the unshaven legs and the Birkenstock people, are going to be literally marching in the streets for pro-vaccination, supporting some of the biggest multinational corporations in the world, literally shills for giant companies. So that people have told you you're on acid,
Right.
and well,
Or religious conservatives and Robert Kennedy Jr. marching hand in hand.
no, it's amazing. It's just like it's like it's I saw a meme one time, and it's kind of it should be the libertarian like motto, which is I believe that I believe that two gay men should be able to get married and protect their wheat farm with guns.
Yeah.
So on that note, I think we'll wrap this up. Thank you. Thank you so much, Alan. We'll get all that stuff in the show notes so that people can reach out to you. And
at least reference the video and look at what you've recommended on the website.
and then we'll go back and get, if you can either send it to us or we'll get that buttoned up so we have those 6 points, because I think that is
all right.
Really,
I'll be happy
really
to. Hey, thanks for inviting me to join you. This was fun. I really appreciate what the two of you are doing with BS Free MD. So thank you.
Awesome.
Thanks. Our sponsor this week is Comp Health. There are a lot of podcasts out there, murder mysteries, breaking news. There's even a podcast about garden gnomes. But instead, you're here learning how to be the best physician, or for our non-physician listeners, informed person that you can be. Smart move. Do you know what else is a smart move? Working a locum tenens assignment with Comp Health. Now, I know what you're thinking. You already have a job, but that's the best part. You can work flexible locum assignments on the side for extra income, or you can work locums full-time too. And to top it off, locums always, or almost always, pays more on average. Just head to financialresidency.com/comphealth and see what locums can do for you financially. So that's our sponsor this week. Obviously, that's targeted to our physician listeners. But if you know anybody in healthcare that's interested in locums, point them their way.
I think that was really helpful. We've been
No.
getting a ton of emails from listeners, some new listeners, requesting information about medical exemptions, for true medical reasons, as well as religious accommodation. But I've been blown away about how many, and it's sad stories where people have true medical reason not to get this vaccine, and their medical practitioner will not do it. I mean, physicians included, not just NPs and PAs. They, we've heard that they're just like, in this organization, we will not give an exemption for anybody, period. I mean, come on, like, use your brain. Well, what if they had a true egg out? I mean, it's just crazy.
We have an absolute explosion of cowardice in medicine right now. And like, when were the days of heroic doctors? I mean, there's some out there for sure. I mean, like, Peter McCullough comes to the front of mind, but like, or that guy who was the NICU doctor who took his BMW motorcycle when his hospital was threatened to burn down in Northern California, and he followed the ambulance with all of the NICU babies. There was 3 or 4 babies in this tiny NICU that he was taking care of. And the ones that couldn't be transferred to another hospital, there was 3 or 4 left. They crammed them into the back of this ambulance, and he followed the ambulance with his motorcycle in case something happened to those babies. And now, I won't fill out an exemption because something might happen to me. Yeah, but you know what? If your patient had freaking Guillain-Barré from a flu shot, then maybe they shouldn't get an experimental agent. Maybe they shouldn't get a novel medication of any kind. Like, I mean, it's just, doctors, stop being cowards!
Yeah, absolutely. Grow some stones. Grow a set of balls.
It's time to nut up. I mean, like,
or
it really...
a big kahunas, or whatever you want to be genderly correct nowadays. But it's just...
I'm not anything correct.
It pisses me off because, the patient should come first, not politics or your own personal beliefs.
Right. Like, I mean, I've said this before. Like, you can have We had a guy that we saw. I mean, and this is, I'm sure at every medical practice, it's the same thing. There's numerous patients like this that are totally schizophrenic that could be treated with an agent, like Depo Haldol, and have them have some modicum of sanity so that they can function and not be riding their bicycles in the middle of the highway at night, putting themselves at risk, and somebody else who inadvertently hits a crazy person crossing the street because they can't be treated because you have to respect their completely insane rights. Or you have somebody that comes in that says, I will never have a blood product even if I have no blood in my system because I get hit by a bus, and you might think that you're insane. Your religious beliefs are insane. And you know what? You would be fired in 2 seconds if you as a physician breached that person's rights and, gave him 2 or 3 bags of blood. Like, they would bring a suit to the hospital and to you personally, their family, even if their loved one survived and wouldn't have survived. You would be totally screwed. You would never in the past have we even come close to thinking, as insane as somebody's beliefs may be, in breaching them until now.
Yep.
So, like, I just freaking, I don't get it. I don't get it.
On that note,
I guess there's no bloopage.
we're going to jump ship next week from the C topic and bring you a little surprise as the holidays roll in.
Oh.
With some spooky medical stuff. Stay
Spooky
tuned.
medical stuff.
It's no secret that medicine is a bit uptight. That's why Tim and I created BS Free MD, to mix things up a little and have fun in the process. Besides, we are having these exact same discussions all the time, so we thought we might as well invite everyone to the party. If you really like us, you can get plenty more and maybe see one of Tim's cool tattoos on our Instagram or Facebook pages at BS Free MD. See you next time.
While we try to keep BS Free MD as raw and real as possible, we can't be held responsible for any medical decisions or discussions had as a result of what you've heard on the show. We know, bummer. But the truth is, we really do care about your questions. So feel free to reach out to us by email at doc@bsfreemd.com.